But that wasn't seen as a problem for very long. And people still spoke as if the pictures actually told the stories. One interesting element, of course, of this possibility of hinting back at a story that everybody knows is then you can start working with your way to tell a story. And when you look at Adam and Eve in a certain drawing by Dürer, you get a very different feeling of what's happening. For instance, there's this one drawing where Adam and Eve are holding each other and they're like taking the apple together at the same time. And it looks like they're actually experimenting together. Whereas you have other depictions where you will have Eve clearly taking it from the snake and handing it over to Adam, which ties in with the idea of a culpability of women much better. So somehow you can subvert the textual narrative in your way of depicting it when you have narratives that everybody already knows, because you're kind of free from telling what actually happened, and then you can give your perspective on what happened, and even sort of subtly subvert the traditional narrative. There's on the other side of the spectrum of this Adam and Eve, which I once studied because I found it particularly interesting. There's a drawing, sort of sketchy drawing by Rembrandt, and he also made a similar engraving afterwards, where you can see Eve handing over the apple, and Adam is like, ah. And it's like, oh, you're giving me something terrible. And of course, it's also like saying, making it clear that he's not the culprit. He's not to be blamed. And of course, I mean, all these things kind of tie in with a certain, with the way women were treated in the Catholic Church and so on and so forth. So there is a propagandistic element to this way of depicting well-known stories. That's pretty interesting to look at, and also how, for instance, the cross as the symbol, as the small symbol, will already appear in drawings, for instance, or in engravings of people who are supposed to be contemporaries of Jesus, as if immediately after the death of Jesus they had started using the symbol that's then used by the church. So kind of by depicting a past which is relevant to your agenda, you can kind of insert elements into this past that you will then use in the present, to kind of make them a logical element of your cult, for instance. So there are all of these things that may look like details. There's even a very famous scene, I think, by Roger van der Weyden, where you have the nativity. So Jesus is just being born, and you already have a cross in the nativity, which is of course a foreshadowing in a certain way of the Passion, but which also has for us a feeling of a paradox.